Welcome back to Grimverse History, where we uncover the strange and forgotten sides of history. Tonight we enter a chapter history rarely explains. This story avoids romance, scandal, and spectacle. It reveals power reshaping intimacy into control. Caligula turned intimacy into a public instrument of power. Nothing remained private under imperial command. Participation signaled loyalty. Silence proved obedience. These were not hidden scandals, but staged messages of control. The most disturbing question is not what happened, but why Rome accepted it as governance. Imagine receiving an invitation after nightfall without explanation. You are not threatened, only observed for hesitation. Even silence becomes part of a political design. Before we descend further, pause briefly with Grimverse History. A quiet like or subscription supports these slow histories. Tell us where you are listening from tonight. Now, dim the lights around your space. Now let the room grow calm and still. This story unfolds through atmosphere, not urgency. Breathe steadily as the past approaches. It is the year 37 after Christ. Rome celebrates a ruler believed merciful. Inside the palace, power quietly turns inward. Reverence slowly transforms into enforced participation. You are standing among a crowd that finally exhales after years of suspicion. Rome wants relief more than vision. Caligula appears less like a ruler and more like reassurance. He carries a name people already trust without asking questions. Being the son of Germanicus still carries emotional weight. The city remembers loyalty, not governance, and confuses the two. You do not ask what kind of man he might become. You ask what he promises to undo from the past after the long shadow of Tiberius. Contrast feels like kindness. The applause is not blind, only tired. Hope, when exhausted, lowers its standards quietly. The city feels lighter that morning, almost relieved. For a short while, things genuinely seem calmer. You hear about pardons before hearing about consequences. Taxes loosen slightly, or at least appear to. Public celebrations return, louder and more generous than expected. Caligula presents himself often, visible and approachable. He moves through crowds that rarely expect proximity to power. Rome mistakes presence for accountability. You notice how quickly gratitude settles into routine. Stability becomes something people stop inspecting closely. The empire does not seek depth at this moment. It seeks rest from vigilance. This period will later receive a flattering label. It will be remembered as a golden beginning. Golden beginnings often appear brighter in retrospect. Comfort rarely asks difficult questions. Then the rhythm breaks without warning, not through rebellion or policy, but through absence. In the year 37, Caligula collapses suddenly. No one agrees on what happens to his body. Everyone agrees on the silence that follows. You feel the change before any announcement arrives. The palace corridors grow colder and more restrained. Waiting stretches longer than comfort allows. Rumors travel faster than certainty ever does. When he returns, his recovery feels incomplete. Physically present, something else feels withdrawn. Power no longer appears symbolic to him. It feels closer, more immediate and personal. You sense it in the room before words confirm it. Laughter arrives a moment too late. Applause sounds carefully timed rather than spontaneous. Attention becomes a form of self-preservation. This is not a sudden collapse of reason. It is confidence no longer moderated by limits. Authority begins to look inward rather than outward. Rome notices the shift without naming it aloud. Naming changes forces responsibility to follow. Silence once again feels safer. You begin to notice that nothing feels spontaneous anymore. What once looked chaotic now follows a familiar rhythm. These moments do not arrive as sudden emotional storms. They appear on time, arranged and strangely predictable. You sense preparation long before any tension surfaces. There are pauses where hesitation once lived. There are patterns where confusion should have existed. This environment does not reward impulse or excess. It rewards repetition, memory, and quiet compliance. Design replaces emotion with something far more durable. What feels disturbing is not the intensity, it is the consistency. Consistency always suggests intention. The space feels the same each time you enter. The lamps burn at identical heights. The floor carries the same polished chill beneath your feet. Someone always stands where you expect them to stand. You realize this is not a singular occurrence. It is a process meant to repeat without resistance. Repetition smooths edges faster than denial ever could. Someone notes attendance without drawing attention. Someone else watches reactions without visible judgment. Everything happens calmly, which somehow makes it heavier. You notice how familiarity weakens protest. When something repeats often enough, it stops demanding explanation. Routine removes urgency more effectively than force. Eventually, even discomfort grows tired of resisting. That is the quiet advantage of structure. The purpose extends far beyond any single person. You are not meant to carry this experience alone. You are meant to share it with people you recognize. You see familiar faces beside you, people from councils, banquets, and polite conversations. Their presence feels deliberate rather than coincidental. Being present becomes a form of participation. Silence begins to feel like a recorded response. Everyone understands this without needing instruction. Isolation creates panic, but shared fear creates stability. No one wants to be the first to react. You sense how quickly responsibility dissolves in a group. When everyone witnesses, no one feels entirely accountable. This is not chaos breaking a system apart. It is a system learning how to protect itself. By the time you leave, nothing feels shocking anymore. It only feels scheduled. You realize attendance is no longer optional tonight. Invitations arrive with polite language and fixed expectations. Families appear together, arranged as if for a portrait. Nothing looks forced, yet nothing feels chosen. You notice how words soften what actions cannot. Tisapena receives a careful label, something like willingness. Signatures appear where hesitation once lived. You understand the purpose without explanation. Witnessing is not passive when records exist. Presence becomes evidence, even without enthusiasm. This is how compliance learns new vocabulary. The room feels warmer than before. Not from bodies, but from attention lingering too long. Someone observes reactions without appearing to judge. You sense how every response matters equally. Compliance reassures, while hesitation becomes information. Both are stored with the same care. Nothing is wasted here. Even uncertainty has value. You feel how quickly caution replaces dignity. Eyes avoid meeting one another across the room. Everyone understands that memory travels faster than rumor. Records turn behavior into leverage. Leverage waits patiently for future use. This is administration wearing a human face. The sound changes as the evening continues. Footsteps soften, voices lower, and laughter thins. You notice families sitting closer together than before. Proximity feels less like comfort and more like containment. You begin to sense the deeper intention. The aim is not destruction from the outside. It is erosion from within familiar bonds. Parents watch children learn restraint early. Spouses measure silence as a form of protection. Trust becomes selective, then cautious, then conditional. You feel how easily suspicion settles indoors. Private conversations shrink to harmless topics. Loyalty quietly rearranges. It arrives through necessity and timing. Families adapt because adaptation feels safer than resistance. This is how structures collapse without noise. The air feels cooler when you leave, not because the night changes, because something follows you home quietly. The place feels less like a palace tonight. It feels closer to an office that never sleeps. Zots are clearly assigned, and everyone knows their lane. A physician checks conditions with professional distance. A clerk prepares documents with steady handwriting. A guard watches movement without visible emotion. An accountant verifies numbers as if balancing a ledger. You notice how ordinary everything appears. Nothing looks dramatic, urgent, or emotionally charged. The calm feels intentional rather than reassuring. Rules sit quietly in the background, doing most of the work. Fees exist where questions might have been asked. Procedures replace decisions with approved sequences. This is not chaos pretending to be order. It is order performing its duties politely. Efficiency rarely raises suspicion. The rhythm settles into something predictable. No one sees the entire picture at once. You notice how this changes perception immediately. When tasks shrink, consequences appear distant. When responsibility divides, accountability softens. Someone completes their duty and steps aside. Another person continues without pause or reflection. You realize how comfort grows inside repetition. Familiar motions reduce the need for thought. Habit becomes more powerful than intention. No one feels like they are deciding anything. Everyone feels like they are simply working. Work has a way of quieting the conscience. The air feels cooler as the process continues, not colder but more mechanical in tone. Everything proceeds even when authority is absent. You sense that direction is no longer required. The structure knows how to sustain itself. Rules justify actions before doubt can surface. People follow procedures because procedures exist. Predictability becomes the primary reward. Stability becomes the final argument. You notice how responsibility dissolves into momentum. No single action feels significant enough to resist. The system no longer belongs to one person. It survives beyond intention, emotion, or command. It continues because stopping would require attention. Attention is the one thing everyone avoids. The room empties without ceremony. You leave knowing nothing needed supervision anymore. The night does not feel dramatic when it happens. It feels practical, like a correction long postponed. Those closest are the ones who step forward, not out of principle, but out of fatigue. You sense the reason before anyone explains it. The breaking point is not morality or outrage. It is humiliation turned inward, finally shared by protectors. Power fails when loyalty feels personally unsafe. The fall is efficient, almost administrative. It ends a person, not a process. Removal is easier than reform. Morning arrives with official adjustments. Names are scratched from records with careful precision. Statues disappear quietly from familiar corners. Documents how language does the heavy lifting. History is edited to sound cleaner than reality. Absence becomes the preferred solution. The name fades from public memory by design. But rooms remember what names cannot carry. Corridors still guide movement the same way. You feel how erasure comforts the living. It suggests closure without requiring change. The system remains, now relieved of attention. Removing symbols is faster than dismantling habits. The city settles into routine with surprising speed. New faces occupy familiar positions without ceremony. Rules continue their work without needing reminders. You sense how consequences move slower than events. Lies shaped during the previous order do not reset. Children grow up inside silences they never chose. Families carry stories that stop halfway through sentences. Questions soften into habits of avoidance. Memory becomes something handled carefully at home. You notice how time absorbs discomfort without resolving it. Generations inherit patterns without explanations. The sifting feels unresolved. The system adapts by continuing unchanged. The air feels lighter after removal. Not because justice arrives, but because tension leaves. Attention shifts forward, eager for calm. You realize endings are often misunderstood. They remove figures while preserving structures. They offer relief without accountability. The system survives because it already knows how. It learned to function without visible leadership. You stand inside a space that looks ordinary again. The danger now feels abstract, almost historical. That is, when it becomes most durable. A person disappears and the mechanism remains. The room feels quiet enough to sleep. Nothing important changes in the dark. The pace slows gently now. The images recede without resistance. Night reclaims its natural place. You can still hear the soft footsteps on the marble. The lamplight flickers, then steadies. The air carries the scent of oil and ancient stone. Everything seems still, but nothing has truly vanished. What history has left behind is not a spectacle. It is a subtle feeling, difficult to name, something that remains when the doors close, something that prefers silence to official memory. Little by little the scene closes silently. The corridors recede. As in an old dream, the present returns without urgency or clamor. You are here, lying down, safe, awake just enough. History asks for nothing more tonight. It has simply passed through you, then withdrawn like a book carefully closed. If these nighttime tales gently accompany you, you can support Grinverse history with a small gesture, a like, a silent share, or a quiet subscription. There's no rush. Everything can wait until tomorrow. For now, rest. Let the night do its work slowly. Goodbye, and we will meet again.